Queen's Park, Greenock Morton, Raith Rovers, Dunfermline Athletic, Hamilton Academical and Airdrieonians are being stalked by two lions. Raith Rovers stop to tie their shoelaces and Airdrie ask, "Why are you bothering? You'll never outrun a lion." To which the Rovers reply, "I don't need to outrun the lions, I only need to outrun two of you." Such is the nature of the 2024-25 Scottish Championship season, with the Jekyll and Hyde Rovers once again failing to follow up a good performance, and results elsewhere pushing Partick Thistle 7 points clear in the playoff places. It looks increasingly likely that the bottom 6 clubs in the division now face a Royal Rumble to avoid the bottom 2 spots. Now, as the Rovers still have a 6-point buffer from 9th, Saturday's 3-1 defeat to Dunfermline means that 20% of all the points gathered by the teams below us in the table have come from the Rovers, a situation which could do with being rectified if the end of the season is to be a little bit boring rather than perilous. This is the Oh No 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 podcast. I am Duncan Cameron, and joining me today to talk about all of that is Allan Douglas Munn. First of all, how are you, Allan?
Well, I was yesterday evening. Had a couple of beers last night and a good night's sleep and a nice head clearing walk with the dogs this morning. So yeah, feeling better now. I wouldn't have liked to talk about this last night, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. A bit of time to settle the spikes out the emotions a little bit.
Yeah.
Alongside me for the second time this season to talk about a defeat at East End Park, my fellow glutton for punishment, it's Leslie Mayburn. How are you, Les?
All right, actually, yeah. I mean, unlike some other people, I wasn't too bothered by Barry Robson's post-match interview. I lived in Aberdeen for 5 years, so I think just kind of monotonous negativity just washes over me. You know, he could have been talking about seagulls getting into bins or not being able to park around Union Street for all I know.
Yeah, suspect that interview might come up once or twice as we go over the events of yesterday. Before we do get into the game itself, though, right? Let's just do a little bit of a state of the nation. So there was a point yesterday, just before half time, where we were 5 points behind fourth, with a game in hand. Now, obviously, things changed after that point, but with the tone of my intro there, and what I suspect is going to be my general tone throughout the rest of the episode. Allan, am I being too pessimistic?
Not necessarily. Probably more pessimistic than I am, but I just generally try and look for the bright side of things anyway. But I can totally see where you're coming from. Ultimately, you know, if you'd asked me coming out at Hamilton on Tuesday, are we going to make the playoffs? I'd be like, absolutely. That's it. We've turned the corner. How many times have we turned the corner just to walk into a wall this season? It's just incredible. If coming out at East End Park yesterday, if you'd asked me if we were going to end up in the playoffs, I would have said I hope not, because I wouldn't have been thinking of the promotion one. So ultimately, as I say, I try and still look positively. I don't think we're going to be relegated, but I can't say that with any level of certainty. It's much more just me being a glass half full kind of guy, and ultimately, yeah, I can. There's no doubt we're in that battle, as you described. Just now our priority is finish up ahead of two of them and get the season wrapped up and come back stronger next year.
Yeah, that's where I am with it, really, is that I don't think, and I mean, well, hopefully I'm not jinxing anything, but I don't think we're going to finish in the bottom two. I just think that the nature of this league, everybody cannibalizes everybody else. And it's not even like the sort of the teams at the bottom all take points off each other. Everybody takes points off each other all the time. And I can't see, based on everything we've seen this season, I basically can't see us being worse than any two of the teams that I listed there. We saw Hamilton the other night, Airdrie on a bit of a resurgence, but had been terrible beforehand, and they've got a lot of points to make up. Queen's Park looked to be struggling. You've got a lot of different options in there. But I think, for me, we needed to win yesterday if it was going to be a let's go and sort of charge up the table. Now, these things can change very quickly. Again, such is the nature of the division. If we go and happen to win our next 3 games, it'll be a totally different tune. But I find that difficult to imagine almost. It's not just about getting the 3 points yesterday. It's about going, look, here's, with all due respect, one of the poorer sides in the division coming off the back of getting beat 3-0 by Airdrie. If you're going to finish 4th, which is basically that's your aim at this point, that's a game you really got to be winning, I think. Leslie, where are you in terms of the pessimist optimist swingometer for this season?
I'm still concerned. I'm still concerned because I don't think we've got enough depth and variety in our squad, and I don't think we have got the ability to score goals in the way that most of the other teams at the bottom half of the table do. Now, that seems like a really weird thing to say after we've horsed Hamilton in midweek, and it will probably be considered by some in the comments to be reactionary. We might come back to that later. But I don't think we're out of the woods yet, and I think looking at our business in the transfer window, it looks like the aim is that we're not going to throw the kitchen sink at an outside chance of getting 4th, and that we're going to try and limp into 7th or 8th with more or less what we have, which is risky, I think. I think that's a big gamble. I don't think we're as, I'm in 2 minds. So I'm not sure whether this is going to be like Ian Murray's first season. I've said this a lot on social media. Ian Murray's first season. We won. We had some really good performances. We had some terrible performances. We had not a lot of variety up top, and then we had Louis Vaughan that came back and fired us to safety. Or it's going to be like the Gary Locke, John Hughes season, where we don't realise how much trouble we're in until it's too late. A team that looked dead and buried go on a massive resurgence and somehow get their way out of trouble. And then by the time we actually realise how much danger we're in, it's too late. So I'm in 2 minds at the moment. I mean, the only thing I do think, though, is like you say, Duncan, at this stage of the season onwards, it becomes very hard for any team in the Championship to move. It's the nature of the beast when you play the other teams 4 times each. Even a 6-point gap to Aki's or something, that becomes quite hard to surmount, a gap even of that size from this point of the season onwards. So that's the one glimmer of optimism I have, but I'm still firmly looking down the table rather than up, which will be very unsurprising to anybody that listens to me on here or follows my social media.
Yeah, it is the case. With a division this size, it's going to be very unlikely. It's just been there's 6 sides in that sort of blob, effectively. If you're willing to kind of bump Airdrie up into it, so can't all win in a weekend. It could be that 5 of them win and we're one of the teams that get beat, but again, it's unlikely. So typically, you're going to be expecting that on any given weekend, at least a couple of those sides are probably going to get beat, either from one of the others or because they happen to be playing Falkirk, Livingston or Ayr, who look half decent, with Thistle in that kind of limbo zone where they actually look a lot of the time as poor as the teams in the bottom, but just have managed to get themselves that bit of a gap. Again, I think largely down to their ability to score goals, which, as you say, seems to be our biggest weakness, which, as far as weakness is goal in football, it's not a great one. I think the pattern of this episode might involve quite a lot of that sort of existentialist type stuff, things that happened yesterday being used to kind of cover wider issues, and it's largely because, and again, as such is the nature of it, we've said this a lot this season, we're seeing a lot of the same things kind of repeated, and it's because the sort of reasons behind them haven't been addressed. A lot of time because it's injuries to key players and things like that. But stepping into the beginning of the game, in terms of the lineup, so there was a little bit of a surprise. I don't think many of us were expecting Finlay Pollock to appear, or certainly from the start, given that he went off injured in Hamilton on Tuesday night. Now, I have to tell you, for me, I was actually pretty pleased when I saw that, because when we were talking about Dunfermline beforehand and talking about how they might play, think about it, there's a chance to go and press them from the front. I think Pollock is the best we've got for doing that. And one of the first thing I've got in my notes is actually it's Pollock intercepting the pass out from Oluwayemi that he then doesn't quite kind of make the most of. But Allan, in terms of the lineup and the strategy from the beginning of the game, is it too harsh to say that that's about as good as it got?
Probably not. I mean, I think like you, I was surprised to see Pollock on there. I was actually surprised with Barry Robson's pre-match interview when he said, "We'll see how he reacts for tomorrow." I was thinking, oh, I genuinely didn't. It hadn't occurred to me at that point that he was even in contention to play. I assumed he would be nowhere to be seen. But you're not used to Rovers kind of taking off players before they get too badly hurt. When it's in a precautionary way, we don't do that. We run them into the ground. So yeah, I was after that performance on Tuesday, you can't not be pleased to see the same team going out. I mean, it's different if you're going away from home to Ayr, for example. That's a totally different proposition from going away to Hamilton. I mean, on the face of it, Dunfermline and Hamilton are about the same level. So why shouldn't we be able to go there? And I mean, I suppose the other big factor is, I don't want to get into Barry Robson territory. Maybe it's the ginger in me, I don't know. But the pitch was a tatty field. So you can't necessarily play football the same way we did against Hamilton. But we knew that going in. So, but yeah, ultimately I was happy enough with the lineup. There was nothing really there that I'm thinking I would have done differently. But.
Yeah, and Les, for you, were you thinking the same thing about the lineup before the game began, and then did that opinion change over the opening kind of period?
I think my thought had been that something Blade and Robbie, I think, either mentioned in the post-match from Hamilton, or at least something we'd talked about offline. I was a bit concerned about starting Josh Mullen as a right wing back. And part of that was, I think, as we said, Hamilton, we caught them at a bad time. They were very poor, and it's very unlikely that he was going to get that much space and have so little defensive duty to do. I mean, Dunfermline, again, they've got good players going forward. They've certainly got better players in the wide position than Hamilton do. And I thought, that's quite risky. We've been here before, especially with the right back position, where just because something has worked once doesn't mean it's a viable long-term solution. And that's been a recurring theme for us over the last 18 months. Just because somebody has done a decent job in a position once doesn't mean it's going to be sustainable. So I thought my thought was, I can absolutely see the logic in sending a winning team out again, but we need to watch out for Mullen being targeted. And if he's being targeted, we need to be able to react to that quickly. So that was my caveat was, I can see the logic behind why we're doing it, but we've got to be prepared to respond if they start targeting our right-hand side defensively.
Yeah, there was two things stood out for me in that first half. And it's both really in hindsight. I don't think I would have done too much differently from the start, but that's absolutely one of them. Between Mullen and Jordan Doherty, it looked to me, anyway, couldn't quite work out how to deal with Lewis McCann and Kieran Ngwenya. And they seemed to be doing different things depending on how Dunfermline came at us. So when they were going a little bit more direct, which they did a little bit more of than I expected, and more so in the second half, to be fair, Mullen was sticking with McCann, and Doherty was kind of waiting for the second balls. But when Dunfermline were playing out slightly more slowly, or playing out from the back, Mullen was then going to meet Ngwenya, and Doherty was drifting across to cover McCann, which led to the really odd situation where Josh Mullen was more advanced when we didn't have the ball than he was when we did, which is kind of backwards. So effectively, when they had the ball in their back line, he was pushing up to sort of make us a 4-4-2 and sort of doing what you would want a winger to do, which is going and closing the fullback. But when they went more direct, he was further back. And when we had the ball, he was starting further back as well. And it was just that sort of mismatch of jobs, of like who's doing what. And they never truly exploited it. They had some chances. And Lewis McCann, I think, is one of these guys who looks more dangerous than he is, with the caveat that 1 time in 10, it does come off for him. And so he can be dangerous. You can't just leave him alone. But I think the first time you watch him, you're like, this guy's quality. Like, he just needs one of these to go in and he's going to be great. And then the more you see him, you're like, oh, actually, this doesn't come off for him very often. That's why he's at this level. But actually, we never quite got to grips with that. And I think the second thing that was kind of worrying me in that half was how much space Ngwenya and Comrie had on either side. So we set out to go and press, and we had sort of Pollock and Gullen covering the two centre-halves, covering Benedictus and Fogarty, and pressing the goalkeeper sort of when required as well. But we weren't then sort of following that up. You then, behind them, you've got Easton, and then quite far back, Stevenson and Mullen. And it was just the sort of pattern of that half, to me, felt like Comrie and Ngwenya largely running in fresh air. More so Comrie. Just, they're putting the ball into him, and he's going 30 yards before he meets any kind of resistance from maybe Ross Matthews drifting across or Stevenson stepping up. And that was what kind of disappointed me more than anything in the first half, was that I felt like we gave them too much of the ball and we didn't have like an equivalent strategy, almost. Like, whether they knew it or not, going into the game, very quickly they established, oh, we can just get the ball to the fullbacks, and quite a lot of leeway for them to go and get us up the park. We didn't have that. We didn't have that equivalent, and I think that's an issue we really need to come to terms with and need to find an answer to. And in part, I think Mullen playing at wing-back is an attempt to do that. And it worked brilliantly. I think we more or less unanimously gave him man of the match for Tuesday, but with the huge caveat that he didn't have to do any defending, and Hamilton were barely interested. And
it also reminds me a little bit of the first half at Firhill early in the season, where both of the wing backs, they were neither defending or attacking. They were almost like caught in no man's land every time, whether we're going forward or back. They just didn't link up the way that they're supposed to. And I remember thinking that a lot yesterday, that, we've got no width at all in like the kind of upper 2/3 of the pitch, even. Like, there's just nothing. We're offering nothing. And obviously that Thistle game, Collins made the changes at half time, which completely turned it around. This time we didn't.
Yeah, because that's the thing with you. I think with your proper wing backs, half of their value is in the potential threat that they offer. So, like, Ngwenya should spend most of that first half worried about, if we get dispossessed, if the ball gets turned over, the wing back is going to be on me and past me, like the same way that Calvin Miller did to Jordan Doherty when we played Falkirk at home, where Doherty had to be really, really careful because he knew as soon as the ball was flipped over, Miller was on his bike and he was away. And with the greatest will in the world, Josh Mullen's just not that guy. And even more so on the other side, Lewis Stevenson's not that guy. Lewis Stevenson is never going to be that guy at 37-year-old. And it's Mullen's not enough for you to do it in a kind of lopsided sense, which is basically what Falkirk did. Keelan Adams was nowhere near as advanced as Miller was, but it meant they could do it in that kind of lopsided sense. And I just don't think we've kind of got it. And it was the right idea. As I say, at Hamilton, it worked really, really well. Didn't work yesterday. Do you need to go right back to the drawing board? Are there tweaks to there? I don't know. But
I think we've got an answer. We've potentially got an answer sitting on our bench from Middlesbrough. Now, at some point, we need to get George Guitow on the pitch. So I'm going to caveat this by saying well, I mean, I'm going to come on that. There may actually point to that. So, he may have been injured. He may not have been fully fit when he came in. I can absolutely understand the logic of not chucking him in against the best team in the league when we played Falkirk. I can also understand not wanting to put him in cold to a derby. But the Hamilton game, again, okay, fair enough. You want to get that over the line. You want the clean sheet. You don't want any dramas. But give him 10 minutes. The last 10 minutes against Hamilton would have been an ideal time just to get him on the pitch and just see what he can do. You know what I mean? Because, looking at me, he looks the part in that, you've got a 6-foot guy who Middlesbrough supporters say can play right wing back. He's hopefully going to be good in the air. If he's not Gubbins, he's going to be good in the air. He's an actual right back by trade. He might be decent going forward. He's another head at set pieces at both ends. But until we actually get him on the pitch, we don't know. I mean, so maybe it's Robson doesn't trust him. Maybe it's just the moment hasn't come. But
he can't be any.
Yeah, he can't be any less effective than Josh Mullen from a defensive perspective.
If he's not fitness and he's just not good enough, why is he here?
Well, I think it's...
ultimately he's come to us to develop as a footballer, but we need to get something out of it as well. So he needs to be. He's not ready for first team at English Championship level, but maybe he is at our level. No, I'm not saying that is the case, and I suspect you're right. It is just that he's not match sharp yet, and we may well see him get 10 minutes on Saturday when we're already 4-0 down or something like that. But...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean that's it. Saturday's that time. You're 4-0 down. Celtic have eased off. Get him on the pitch when it's effectively become a training exercise. And I do think we've brought him into play because we've put our only actual designated proper right back, Kieran Freeman, out for the rest of the season. We wouldn't do that if we were just bringing this boy up to get a bit of experience.
No.
So I think the two things with that. So there was a journalist from Teesside, is that Middlesbrough?
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Sorry, I had his name and I've immediately forgotten it. James Barker, journalist who kind of covers Middlesbrough, who'd said that George Guitow is sort of happier on the right of a 4, but has the sort of attributes to play wing back. So I wonder if going into the Hamilton game, that must have been a coin toss. Like, do I go for Josh Mullen or do I play George and see how he gets on? And it probably, and actually, I think justifiably so, he's gone, well, actually, Josh is more of a winger. We're probably going to have more of the ball here. Hamilton are Gubbins. Let's go with Josh. And it's totally justified. Man of the match. Great performance.
Yeah.
And then after that, it would then be a very big decision to then go, not only am I putting this kid in for his debut in a derby, I'm also dropping the guy who was a standout on Tuesday. So again, I've got sympathy with Barry Robson from the start, with the way that he's gone for that. My issues are more around kind of, I suppose, failing to adapt as the game went on, I suppose. Because I don't think we particularly did that. But let me talk about that more at kind of half-time, because I think that's where the opportunity presented itself. So there's a couple of kind of half chances either side before the goal. There's Otto puts a shot wide for them. Gullen has one that's a little tamer than he would have liked. The keeper gets down to. I see the big one that's in the highlights is Pollock picking up the pass from Oluwayemi, and just you can see exactly what he wants to do, and he just never doesn't quite catch it, and it's too easy for the goalkeeper.
It's frustrating because he doesn't have to. He doesn't have to take it that quickly. He's in acres of space. He's got loads of time to either settle and get a shot or smash a ball across the 6-yard box for someone running in.
Yeah, Gullen's square. Because it's Gullen's pressing the goalkeeper and Pollock gets it. And I think that's, in hindsight, I think that's the move. It's a touch to control it and then just square it, and it should be a tap in. The The goal, though, does eventually come from the penalty spot. And the question I have written in my notes here, Les, is what would we do without Dylan Easton?
Exactly, because I think you've mentioned it before. One of the biggest problems we have is actually getting the ball into the box. And the one consistent way that we have to get the ball into the box is to give it to Dylan Easton somewhere about 35 yards from goal and let him just use his quality and individual brilliance, maybe with a wee bit of help from Lewis Stevenson, to actually get the ball into the box. It's the only consistent way we've got to get anywhere near goal. And I know opposition fans moan about him being a dive and so. I don't think you can have any complaints with that one. It's one of those ones where, because of the nature of how good he is on the ball and how he moves, you're either going to let him go past you or you've got to chance risking giving away a penalty by making contact, which is exactly what happened. And I think, if we avoid relegation, we should get some Easton pens made up, because that's probably what's kept us up. Dylan Easton pen.
Better write that down.
No, I mean, it's just, again, brilliant bit of play from him to get the ball into the box in the first instance, and then conceding a penalty is one of the inevitable outcomes that comes from that. So we would be definitely in the relegation spots if it wasn't for Dylan Easton. We'd probably be 10th if it wasn't for the contributions he's made. And I know you talk about winning penalties. It's not a phrase I like, that you won a penalty. You kind of gained one. I don't like that as a phrase. But it is as a result of him being in the box. So, yeah, no, he's absolutely invaluable to us this season, especially.
Yeah, and it's as you say, it's down to the type of player that he is and the type of runs that he makes, and he just sort of draws the defender to him and then jinks away from him. And yeah, I spoke to someone yesterday who was in the other end who'd said they thought it looked soft. Like, that's as clear a penalty as you'll see. Like, the guy's his leg and his body are across him. Like, it's one of these that even if Dylan Easton had decided, I'm going to dive here, he would have still crashed into the man before he hit the floor, because he's cut his body across him. So,
you look for the defender's reaction, and the guy who makes a challenge gives it the arms up. Oh, I didn't touch him, ref, which all defenders naturally do, but nobody complains when it's awarded. Nobody raises any issues at all. It's as clear a penalty as you'll see, and probably just about the only decision the ref got right all day.
It's one of those. I said at the time, it's just like it's lazy leg, where he gets wrong-footed, and what you need to do as a defender is recognise that you've been beaten and at least spin your whole body out the way, and it just doesn't do it. He leaves his leg in, and it's always going to be a penalty. Actually, whether Easton has to initiate contact or not, in this case, I genuinely don't think he does. Either way, you leave your leg out like that, that's going to be a penalty. And I've got zero kind of sympathy for the defender whatsoever. And Dylan Easton, as he has done with unerring accuracy this season, puts the penalty away. Don't think he's missed any that I've forgotten. And that, I mean, at that point, Allan, were you sort of wiping your brow and thinking, oh, we've kind of gotten away with one here, like this is against the run of play?
Not necessarily, because I didn't feel like we were under any real pressure at our end either. It was, I mean, they certainly had the better of the midfield. I thought Otto was outstanding yesterday. I thought he was probably the man of the match by a distance. He's a very, very good player. I'd quite happily have him at the Rovers. I thought him, and despite getting away with a couple, I thought Hamilton was decent as well, actually. Kind of in that kind of spoiling role to let Otto make the play. So they had a lot of decent possession, but never really looked like troubling us too much. I thought Paul Hanlon had another really solid game yesterday on the whole. So it's not like I wasn't sitting there thinking, right, let's just get to half-time and make some changes. But I wasn't thinking we were banging down the door either. It was a fairly drab game of football with some half chances, nothing spectacular. But it was a great time to score. In one way, it's always a great time to score just before half time. But I suppose the flip side of that is, would we have made some tactical changes at half time if it'd still been 0-0 that we didn't because we'd scored the penalty? You can only speculate, but I suspect we might have. So it maybe actually worked against us.
Yeah, I suppose we'll never know on that front, and it would have been interesting to see. My suspicion actually is that we wouldn't have done, but let me come back to that in a minute.
Okay.
Leslie, what were your thoughts getting in at halftime?
I felt similar to how I felt after the first half of the Queen's Park game, which was that was exceedingly fortunate. Probably, maybe not quite deserved, but we got in at half time. We've won a big watch there. Now, let's see how we can go out and be better in the second half. And that was something maybe that, to give Neil Collins his credit, there was a lot of things I think he didn't get right in his time with us. But that Queen's Park game was one where he was like, right, we really got away with it in that first half. Apart from that, it wasn't working. Let's do something different. And he made a change, and we were better in the second half. And the Partick game was similar. So I think I would probably have wanted us to do something with the right back area. Having said that, and we might come back to this later, I will argue that I'm not really sure what you could do differently with the players that we have at our disposal. But that's maybe a debate for later on in the episode.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting what you say about Neil Collins at Queen's Park, because I had not thought about that. I'd forgotten about that. And it's a very interesting comparison. Because I think on the face of it, it's actually incredibly similar. You know, it was 0-0, we got a penalty out of nowhere. The additional factor, we were much worse at Queen's Park. Like, we were terrible.
100%, yeah.
Completely abysmal.
Yeah.
And the penalty was almost like a freak occurrence. Whereas yesterday it was a little bit more back and forth without a lot of quality, and we then got the goal. But what I've been very subtly building towards here is some criticism of Barry Robson. Probably more so in the way that he's explained what he's done than what he's actually done. And so as you two are well aware, Blair and I have gone 12 rounds this morning back and forth on various aspects, including whether or not interviews matter and, well, umpteen other things. With very opposing views on lots of elements of yesterday. But to probably try and tie in two of my main bones of contention. So I'm going to pick a couple of points out of the interview, specifically when he mentions halftime. So he said that in the first half we were in control, which I'm not too sure about, and also that we'd done the job in the first half, with I think the kind of subtext being, let's go out and do it again. I would really take issue with that. I don't think we'd done a job. We were 1-0 up, and I recognise that. I recognise that we were winning the game, and in that sense, maybe it's slightly churlish for me to be like, oh, we were winning 1-0. But and this ties into the second half as well, because obviously what happened afterwards. But I don't think that's a very high bar, effectively. I think if you watched that first half and went, we've done a job, we're in control, I'm not so sure. Like, if you, I mean, this is too big an example, but it's the obvious one that comes to hand, right? See if we go to Celtic Park next week and we have no control and we have no chances and we get a penalty in the 44th minute and we're 1-0 up at half time, that is job done. That is like, we have done the job we came here to do. Going away to Dunfermline, who get beat 3-0 by Airdrie last weekend, I was hoping for more than that. I was hoping for more than just like, this has been a shite game. There's been no quality. We've managed to get a goal out of nowhere. If there's another 45 minutes of the same, hopefully we'll get the same outcome. Like, I would have thought, and again, I appreciate we were much worse at Hampden, and I'm by no means suddenly back in Neil Collins, but I would have hoped more of that kind of mindset of, well, we've gotten a goal here, we have won a watch, as you've said. Now we can actually make a change or two, whether it's just shape or it doesn't have to be substitutions, just a strategy. we need to change something to exert more control on this game. Because I don't think we did have control at all. It looked to me like the kind of game that was going to be decided by 3 penalties and a deflection. And who they went to was just luck, because it was end to end, it was scrappy, very little quality, very little control. And I'm a little bit disappointed almost that Barry Robson seemed content with that at half-time. And I appreciate that that's fairly critical. And a lot of this, and this is at the sort of core of my disagreement with Blair. And not to speak for him when he's not here to defend himself, but I think generally his point is effectively the interviews don't matter. It basically doesn't matter what Barry Robson's come out and said. You should be judging him purely by what he's done. Whereas I'm more inclined to give some weight to what he's saying. And what he's saying is, I thought the first half was fine, so I didn't make any changes because I thought we could go and do the same thing again. And I disagree that was the right thing to do. I didn't think we were good enough. And part of that, maybe part of that's just me going like, oh, it's a derby. I think we should be, going all guns blazing or whatever. And maybe I've got a too pessimistic a view of Dunfermline. Maybe they're better than I'm giving them credit for. But I'd kind of hope for more than just like, oh, we've basically sclaffed a 1-0 win. Class. Let's keep going almost. Like, there were areas we could have addressed and we chose not to. And it's very similar to me as the Falkirk game at home, where we went out with plan A. Plan A did not work because it was built on pressing them, and they been over it. They did something completely different. And we just did plan A for a while longer, and then we get in at half time, and then came out for the second half and just did plan A again. It's like, I know we've got injuries, and we've not got a lot of striking options, but there are other things that you can do. It was particularly galling there because we were getting beat. Again, I realised we were winning, but I don't know, I felt like we just left it up to luck too much. Like, rather than trying to actually go and adopt a specific tactic for trying to, especially once you're 1-0 up, like, kill the game if you have to. But don't know. That was maybe a bit scarred thoughts, but that's kind of where I've been with it. Right, tell you what, let's have the break and then we'll come back and we will talk about second half. Blair.
Yes, mate.
You're a man.
Yes.
And you have thoughts and feelings and emotions.
Yes.
Are you good at talking about all that stuff?
Well, I try my best, but I don't know. Probably not as much as I should.
I'm the same. I feel better after getting stuff like that off my chest, but I don't do it anywhere near often enough. Have you heard about Andy's Man Club?
They're brilliant. They create a safe space for men to sit down and talk about the important stuff. And they do it right across the country as well.
Yeah, exactly. They've got more than 200 meetings across the UK, and it's every Monday night at 7 o'clock, including one at Starks Park.
And if anyone wants more information on it, they can go to andysmanclub.co.uk or search for Andy's Man Club on Facebook. It's okay to talk, and now we're going to get back to talking about the Rovers.
So the teams do come back out for the second half in the same shapes, no personnel changes. I saw a suggestion that Dunfermline sort of second half were a little bit more direct. I have to say I didn't kind of clock that at the time. But looking at the highlights and kind of see it, maybe they weren't quite kind of knocking it about the back as much as they had done. They certainly didn't give themselves that opportunity to be caught out the back like they did early doors, so maybe that is fair. And there's a couple of chances at the start of the half, again, probably half chances at best, but I mean, to say this, the one, I think it's the first thing that happened in the second half, was a ball over the top for Gullen, and he takes the touch, he brings it down, and then the shot's blocked. I mean, if that goes in, I'm not sitting here complaining about Barry Robson and not making half-time changes. And the fact it doesn't go in has nothing to do with him. So I realise there are fine margins. But it's not too long after that the equaliser does come. This one, again, it is another penalty. Allan, any question marks over the decision for this one?
I have to say, because even all the replays, you can't really see it hitting his hand. You've just got to assume, like Barry Robson said in his interview, it's hit his hand, so you've got to assume that the referee has seen it's hit his hand. But it looks like, to me, his hands are in front of his body, so even if it's not hit his hand, his body would have blocked it anyway. It's one of those that the handball rules are so difficult now. If the referee's deemed that he's used his hand to block a goal-bound shot, then he has to give a penalty for it. Booking him is ridiculously harsh, by the way, because there's literally nothing he could do about it. But for me, I don't actually know the handball rules. I've not, or laws, I suppose.
No.
I've not read them properly, and I have no intention of doing so either. I mean, this is a bunch of jobbers talking about football. We're not a proper broadcast by any stretch of the imagination, so I have no intention of doing my research. For me, that should not be a penalty. There's nothing he can do about it, and he would have blocked the ball anyway if his hands had been out of the way. And he was trying to do what they're told to do. Don't make your body bigger, tuck your arms in. He did all the things you're supposed to do. How can he do it all right and still give away a penalty? I don't know. I made a joke about the ref earlier getting lots of decisions wrong. I'm not going to say this was a blatant one he got wrong, because I can see why it's given. I just don't like it. And I genuinely think I would be the same if it had been at the other end. I would love it, and I would absolutely take it, but I would still say that I don't think it should be a penalty. But then laugh about it.
It's, as you say, mostly it's difficult because there's not really a conclusive angle. And as you say, I don't think very few people have a comprehensive grasp on the laws of handball as they actually are at the moment. I've maybe said this before on the podcast, but I always think about handball the same way that the Supreme Court in the US had a case in front of them about pornography, and they got in a big argument about trying to define what it is. And one of the lawyers said, I don't know how to define pornography, but I know it when I see it. That's how I feel about handball. Like, if you just show a clip of football to a football supporter and the ball hits somebody's hand, you go, should that be a penalty or not? I think you'd get broad consensus. I think, like, once you've watched enough football, you have a kind of feel for what should be punished and what shouldn't. Actually try to define it in black and white is quite difficult. And that, for me, with this one, like, it's a shot on target. If it's hit his hand, unless it is literally in front of his chest, if it's hit his hand and it's anywhere almost outside the silhouette of his body, I think that should be a penalty, basically. Because effectively you're gaining an advantage by using your hand. Whether deliberate or otherwise, it's clearly not deliberate in the sense you'd understand it outside of football. He's not meant to handle the ball. You get into secondary stuff. I've seen quite a few Dunfermline supporters saying, should that actually be a red card if he stopped that ball going into the goal? And again, like, I think by the rules, it probably should be. If it's going to go in, he stopped it with his hand. Surely that's denying a goal-scoring opportunity. But that then, by the same token, that then feels incredibly harsh because he hasn't meant it. So, again, who knows? But ultimately, if the shot's going across and it's hit his hand, Les, I think probably the more disappointing thing for me is, well, it's a set piece, first of all. Although we don't concede directly from it, it is a set piece. There's an opportunity to clear that ball as well. Ross Matthews, I don't quite know what happens if he slips, if he's tripped by Chris Kane, or if he just doesn't quite get the contact. But it's a bit scrappy. You'd kind of hope we'd be able to deal with that a little bit better.
Exactly. No, I mean, I can't add it to my spreadsheet of goals conceded from crossballs, but it's certainly a contributing factor in that we've not dealt with it properly, and then people are flapping wildly about at it, which allows somebody to get a shot away, and which then leads to a penalty. So I guess it's, again, not being able to deal with set pieces effectively. And I think having the height of guys we had on the pitch has probably got something to do with that as well. Again, we're minus possibly, if you have a bigger right back on there, you've got somebody who can get another head who can get on it. But again, it's not dealt with. The fact that it is a penalty, the referee has pointed very quickly at the spot, which makes me think he has seen something that, by his definition, is a penalty. And I've not seen anything to kind of doubt that. It's unfortunate, but I think that's what he has defined as a penalty. It would have been extremely harsh if Hanlon had been sent off. Right? If this was like the English Premier League, if it was in the Scottish Premier League, it would have taken 15 minutes, and then they would have sent him off but awarded a gold kick or something like that. If it was the English Premier League, it would be a red card and a penalty. So no complaints from me. I accept that the referee has probably seen something given where he is and how quickly he's made his decision. But again, it stems from not dealing with a corner effectively.
Yeah, it's not the easiest one to deal with. It comes down to the back post. It's certainly beyond sort of where the goalkeeper can deal with it. But yeah, it's a familiar kind of failing. There's then the actual penalty itself. I have to tell you, in terms of sort of my opinions on things evolving over since yesterday, I've actually changed my tune on this a little bit as well. Because at the time, I thought it looked like the worst penalty I'd ever seen. At the time, I thought Dabrowski had saved it because it was so poorly hit. I thought he can't possibly have not saved that. Actually, having seen the replay, I'm slightly more inclined to be a bit more charitable. Actually, I think he's hit it fairly well and he's hit it low. And it's kind of classic sense. Dabrowski's almost sort of dived past it, and he can't just sort of expand his rib cage enough to trap that ball. And I think that there is also an element of criticism that you get that is attracted by that, where if you'd just gone the wrong way, you don't get any of that criticism at all. You get much more criticism for nearly stopping it than you do for not getting anywhere near it. Like, by that sense, the second penalty is much worse because he's nowhere near it. But all the criticisms for the first one. I appreciate I may well be in the minority on that one. Alan, what did you make of that?
I tend to agree with you, actually. It's very similar to what happened to Callum Ferry at Hampden, except, Jameson's was barely powerful enough to actually make it. I think it just hit the net, whereas Chris Kane actually hit it pretty hard. And, if Dabrowski's just flopping down so that he's in a position where he would have blocked that, he's got no chance of getting to it if it's anywhere near the post. And folk are then, if Chris Kane hits it there, they're criticising him for that. He's got to try and get as far across the goal as possible once he's made up his mind. And you can't do that and, increase the power of gravity at the same time and make yourself fall down quicker. You just can't do it. It's a good penalty. Like, but Kane, he's hit it really well, really low. It looks worse than it is because he gets so close to it, but I don't really think there's much he could have done with it. I actually pointed it on Twitter. You see it from one angle that chances are if he saves it, it gets a retake anyway, because it looks like he'd maybe stepped off his line a wee bit as well. So,
the other thing with the kind of diving past the ball with that is it's very difficult not to just put it straight back to the striker anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he showed all day how he's a lot quicker than I ever gave him credit for. His pace cost us some real problems yesterday, so I think he would have got to it first.
Yeah, it's a very odd performance from him in the sense that, his goal was a deflection that I think he basically knows nothing about and two penalties. But sort of setting that aside, he was very, very good.
Yeah.
He almost never looked like scoring apart from his 3 goals, but somehow also was very good, which seems strange, but
I would love a guy like Chris Kane in our team, or a Stevie May. The closest analogy I can think of is when we had Stephen McLean when we were in League One. Just an old warhorse up front, an old stager. Chris Kane's not as old as he looks, as far as I believe, but an old stager up front who knows every trick in the book, who knows everything that defenders are going to try and do, who knows how to get an advantage, who knows how to take an advantage out of faster and better players. I would kill for a guy like that in our team next season.
There at St Johnstone. Who have they got coaching their strikers to do that?
Yeah, I do think that is something that we miss. I talk all the time about like Jamie Gullen and the way that he drifts and all this kind of stuff. Like, the vast majority of the strikers that we've had over the last few seasons have all been based on endeavour first and foremost. Like, do the running, do the work, be in the right areas enough of the time that the ball will go in the goal sometimes. Whereas, actually, a lot of the time you're better off with somebody who just knows where to be. Brian Graham's a perfect example. Brian Graham's not running a channel. He's never been outside the width of the box in about 6 years, but he knows where to be when the ball gets to him. And I think, Chris Kane puts a lot of effort in as well, but he's in that same kind of mould. He knows how to be a striker. And you could see that yesterday. Although none of that really had anything to do with any of the goals. Although I suppose now the second penalty is very much a little bit like Easton's. He deserves the credit for winning that penalty. Although again, we'll come on to that in due course. Before the Rovers go behind, there is a big chance for Jordan Doherty with a header. Les, does that go into the bracket of got to score?
It goes into the bracket of should score, I think. Should connect with it better, should at least get it on target and force a save out the keeper. Although I'll go back to what I said at the Falkirk game as well, which is that when your best chances are coming from a centre-back, you've got to be a bit worried. When your most dangerous chances are coming from your defenders, then you do have to be a bit concerned. Mm-hmm. But he's got a free header. I think at the very least he's got to get it on target from there, and it's just really unfortunate he doesn't. I mean, it would have been great for him to get his first goal for us, but he's got to connect with that better for me.
Yeah, I've seen a few people online complaining about our long throws yesterday, and that chance came from a long. I know it came back out to him and he then crossed it, but and that's what if we're taking a normal throw in there to someone to then cross it in. You've not got your centre halves up for it. You've got your centre halves up because we're treating it almost like a corner because we're chucking it long. I'd agree. I think he should do better, certainly.
If anyone else has noticed, but we don't create chances from open play. So if we can get them from throw-ins, that is a marked improvement. Mm-hmm, that's a whole extra thing. And fair play to Liam Dick for somehow discovering he's got this. Because it's decent kind of trajectory on it as well. It's creating chances that are
at a premium. More like Lewis Strapp though, and run the whole length of the pitch to take them from the other side.
Walk across to get the towel out.
I think Lewis Strapp apparently went off with an injury again yesterday, like another freak injury. So he took a kick in the face on his debut for Airdrie. Had to sit out a couple of weeks. He was back, and yesterday he fell and he dislocated his shoulder. The guy's just got no luck at all. Like, he really is. Hard up for that. But if it keeps him away from playing against us and beating us at our own game with these long throws, then I'm not going to complain about it. We then do go behind. Now again, you can make a case that this is very unfortunate. Barry Robson certainly makes that case. And again, I'm going to have a dig at him in a second, to be honest with you. But before we do that, let's actually go through the goal itself. So it is a corner that breaks out to Kieran Ngwenya. And as the Rovers defence come charging out, he hits his shot. And Chris Kane also kind of on the turn. I think it comes off his chest. And Dabrowski's completely wrong-footed. He's tracking the shot and the ball ends up in the back of the net. Very, very reminiscent of our last trip to East End Park when Unautu scored a very similar one. Allan, are there points of failure in this? Is there places you're saying, we've got to be shutting that down here? Or is this one that you just have to say it's freakish bad luck and you accept it and move on?
Probably two, one of which didn't. The first one is you can't give Ngwenya that much space. You can't close him down. I suspect that's probably leading into what your criticism of what Barry Robson says is going to be, in terms of apparently doing all the right things. And then the other one is what's Chris Kane doing on his own on the penalty spot. Now, if someone's rifling a shot in, unless you're very unlucky, which we were, him being there on his own shouldn't matter. But if Ngwenya chooses to play a wee ball through or dink it over the top to him, he's then on the penalty spot when nobody anywhere bloody near him. So absolutely, there's 2 points there. I've seen a lot of question marks about, is he offside, isn't he? I kind of feel like it was either Dick or Hanlon who was in the kind of left centre-back role, might have been about 2 or 3 yards deeper than everyone else and possibly playing him on. There's also a question mark, has it come off his hand rather than his chest? there's not enough there to see it. So
Nah.
certainly not enough for me to even question it as a decision. I don't know. It's certainly shaped to kind of look like it come off his chest, so I don't know. But I would, yes, it's unlucky, but we could certainly have defended it better.
At the time, I was hoping for an offside, but very much it was hope rather than anything else. And I think looking at it back, I think you're right. I think it's whoever it is that's the kind of furthest one back is playing him on. Actually, the bit I'm gonna sort of criticise Barry Robson for, actually not necessarily the defending of the actual bit itself, because I think what he says is in terms of the way they break out is fine, and when you look at it, I think certainly you can criticise it because it's a short corner, and we've got two guys out to pick up whoever it is that takes it and whoever it is the short ball goes to. Those two are covered, but Ngwenia's just standing on his own, and when the pass goes out, 4 players break, and I think what Robson's getting at is that 4 Rovers players break. Matthews and Brown go, but the other 2 pull back, and I think that's what he's getting at. Where it's like they've kind of actually done the right thing there. You know, they've not gone sort of primary school style and all charged the ball. They've some have gone and some haven't, and actually, Brown and Matthews both get really close to Ngwenia. And it's kind of the bad luck that it gets through from there. And then once it takes a touch off somebody, it could go anywhere. So that, in that sense, I don't have any great issues. Again, I think it is unfortunate, and this is again something I'll come back to. But my issue with it is Barry Robson takes a fair bit of time in his interview to criticise the referee. Now, he criticised the referee for the Hanlon one. I think that's totally up for grabs, right? If you think it's too close and that shots from that distance shouldn't be a handball, I think that's totally a fair argument. And if that's the case, then fine. I don't have any issues with that at all. But with this one, he says that Lewis Stevenson is something. He says he's torn in half or something. He says he's halved by Chris Hamilton at the start of the move that then goes on to become the second goal. It probably is a foul. I think on balance, it probably is a foul. It's kind of 60-40 for me. I think Hamilton maybe fouls Stevenson. I could see the argument against. But it's after the pass is gone. So Stevenson plays a short pass to Brown and then gets clattered by Hamilton. Some referees will give you that, some won't. Brown then gets caught in possession. It's not a great pass. He doesn't take a great touch. He gets caught in possession. Dunfermline then go and attack, have sort of a phase of attack and win a corner. They put that corner in and we clear it for another corner on the other side. They then take that corner short, play it out to the box. There's a shot that's deflected and goes in. These events are not close enough. You can't say, we should have had a soft foul on the halfway line 2.5 attacks ago. So that's not the referee's fault. Defend your corners properly. It's very excusey for me. Is basically this is my overall point. I did not like that post-match interview because it was very excusey. You might have seen there is the clip on kind of Dunfermline Twitter this morning where someone's effectively just listing the excuses as he says them. It's actually quite well done. If it wasn't our manager, I would have found it quite funny. But it's very excusey. It's very... The pitch wasn't very good and we were heavy-legged after Tuesday. These things are true. The referee for the first one, I see maybe. The referee for the second one, not having that at all. Like, it's too far removed. It's not... You know, if a penalty is given against you for a handball on the line and you don't think it's a handball, fine, that you criticise the referee for that. A foul on the halfway line. Like, even if they go to McCann who takes the ball away, even if he scores directly from that, I still think you have to go, Stevens got to play a better pass, Brown's got to be stronger when he gets it. The fact it's that, plus 2 more corners, I don't know, man. That's and maybe he's protecting his players, right? Maybe he just doesn't want to go. he's too soft, got to do better. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe he's doing that kind of public shield. But it wasn't the only point in that interview. For me, personally, very low on accountability. And it, like, I touched on it before. It feels like he's basically gone, we were really unlucky there, as if we were playing a game of rock, paper, scissors. Like, you have levers to pull. You have the ability to affect the events of this game. And I don't think we did enough of that. And I think we... Like, don't get me wrong, right? I think Dunfermline will be doing somersaults that they scored 3 goals in that game because they did not create a lot of chances. So, I mean, like, did they deserve 3 goals? I don't know, but, like, deserve's got nothing to do with it. We didn't do enough to deserve to win a game of football on our own merits. And, like, that's the bit we need to worry about. Like, if you go and score 3 goals and the opposition score 4 deflections, then, like, that's one thing. But we got a penalty out of nowhere. They got 2 penalties out of nowhere on a deflection. Like, you've got... I said it already, so I'm sorry I'm repeating myself, but, like, I just think you've got to offer more than that. You've got to be... Again, we're not going to Celtic Park. We're not going to Ibrox. Like, we went to East End Park, and I just don't think we did enough to earn anything out of the game. And the fact that, like, yeah, their goals were maybe elements of fortune in them, I don't think it's enough to just shrug your shoulders and go, bad luck. Like, you've got to give more to try and actually affect the outcome of the game.
I think I wouldn't disagree with that. What I would maybe say, this is going to go off in a bit of a segue, is about what we actually reasonably could change. And I touched on that a little bit earlier. So, see on Tuesday night, we were 3-0 up against Accies at half-time. They were able to take Ollie's shot off and put Todorov on. And they were able to put Sean McGinty on. Now, I am not condoning or encouraging us to sign either of those players, but they had players on the bench who they could put on and say, right, here is something we are going to do very differently. And to be fair to Accies, I mean, the game was dead by that point. Todorov got a couple of headers away and he got a yellow card, which was funny. But the point is, they actually had something different. If you look at our bench, we've got Aidan Marsh. Aidan Marsh is fantastic, but he's quite similar to Gullen and to a lesser extent to Pollock. We've got Lewis Gibson, who offers something very similar to Pollock. We've got Aidan Connolly again, who's another wee winger. We've got a couple of centre-backs who the manager clearly doesn't fancy. And we've got one very young midfielder in Montague. There's not a lot there with the injuries in the squad that we have that let you do much differently. I agree, I mean, formation-wise, I mean, the thing I would probably have done in hindsight is maybe gone to a back 4 and potentially put Aidan Connolly on to at least get a bit of pace, and we know he can crack them in, he can cut inside. That's maybe the one lever I think that you could have pulled a bit earlier. But I do agree, having kind of gone on that big rant about how one-dimensional the squad is, I do think you're right. You know, last season, we absolutely mercilessly ripped Jim Goodwin for complaining about his players. And I think it was your words were, if only there were someone who could have managed that. And
yeah.
You know, I think I can see both sides. I do think we have quite a limited squad, and there's very few things you can do. But I do also see where you're coming from, and I think that there are things Robson could have changed that he could have changed quicker than he did.
Yeah, so let's stay on this tangent because it's another point I was going to come around to. Anyway, I do think he's got options to change it, actually. And he's basically got one, which is that we started the game without any wingers, and all we have on the bench is wingers and centre-half. Like, that would have been the change for me at half-time, even. Go to the 4. You've actually got the players to do it without having to actually change. You wouldn't even have to make a substitution. Could have just gone to the 4 at the back, Doherty to right back, Mullen to right wing, Pollock and Gullen up front, Easton over to the left-hand side. would at least have shut down those kind of fullback roles. Now, there's always knock-on effects, but for example, you could have done that. Into the second half, Pollock was shattered. Absolutely done in after an hour. And no wonder, because as you say, we don't have a lot of substitutes. He's played a lot of football recently. He played 85 minutes against Falkirk, came off injured against Hamilton. But he's in that team for his energy. Now, he's got quality, he scored on Tuesday night, no issues with that whatsoever. But clearly, the reason he started against Falkirk, in the cup game in particular, coming in from the cold, was for his energy. And he was brilliant, and that was what he gave us, and he was really, really good that first half. Once his energy runs out, he's nowhere near as effective. He's not a, take the ball in and take a couple of touches and play it off. He's a runner. And he was shattered. And then when we made the change, we put him to right wing. Like, he's shattered. We've got wingers. That's the one thing where you go, all right, we need to make the change. I want to get another striker on. Right, Marsh is going on. But Pollock's shattered. You've got Connolly available. You've got Gibson available. Like, I realise I'm really hammering him for this interview. But he says players were a bit leggy after Tuesday night, a bit jaded. Only made 2 subs. You get 5 substitutes you can use. And you've got, we're chasing the game. You've got wingers, you've got attacking players. You can stick Kai Montague on. You can stick Lewis Gibson on. I don't know. I see, we've spoken about this before, that kind of what you want from a manager's interview, however much stock you put in it. And I realise that I am on the far end of this, particularly today. What you basically want is to listen to the manager's interview and think, he watched the same game I did. That's not the feeling I got listening to that interview. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, or why, if this is what you think, why have you done that? Like, I just didn't really. As Pollock for me was just on 10-15 minutes too long. I recognise
that was the most obvious one. I think there was one point where he was kind of chasing the ball down into the left hand side, and first of all, I can't remember who the defender was. Kind of beat him for pace and beat him to the ball. And that's the first sign that he's clearly not 100% if he's getting beaten for pace by the defender. But then he was kind of just wandering around and he made no effort. Like when the ball was back in play, he made no effort to get back. He was clearly shattered. And I think he played for 10-15 minutes after that.
Yeah.
And you're just thinking, I mean, I had to watch what I was shouting in the stadium because I have a funny feeling it was his dad that was behind me the way he was talking about him. So I didn't want to get too. And that's saying I had no issue at all with Pollock's performance. I thought he'd done well. He'd done his job, but it was, as well as anyone else. I didn't want him off for any other reason other than he looked shattered and we needed more legs up there.
Yeah, I've got no issue with Pollock, how he played the game, anything like that at all. But if a player's knackered, he's knackered. And as in, he actually, it was particularly when he moved him to the right wing, that's when I was like, the hell, like, what are we doing? You've got Aidan Connolly. Aidan Connolly's a brilliant player to play in the right wing. I mean, all things being even, more often than not, I would want Aidan Connolly ahead of Finlay Pollock, let alone Finlay Pollock, who's run himself into the ground. I find that kind of maddening a little bit as well. Yeah. Right, we've not even got to the third goal yet. But good news is I think I've covered most of the things I wanted to complain about. So the third goal comes from, again, a little bit kind of sloppy play in the midfield. What's his name? Kane Richie Hosler had come on for Dunfermline, was doing a bit of running about. Scott Brown manages to, sort of in the one sense, take the ball off his toes, but in the other sense, just kind of pass the ball backwards into his own box. Les, how much blame are you apportioning to Kevin Dabrowski this time?
95 to 100%.
Yeah, I'm with you on this.
If you haul a striker down when he's through on goal like that, it is absolutely, completely your fault as a goalkeeper. and I don't have any. It's just a rush of blood to the head, and he's hauled him down in the box, and I think unfortunately it gives even more ammunition to those who want to see Kev dropped. To say, oh, look what happened here. We were 2-1 down, and he hauled Chris Kane down in the box. Now it becomes, as I say, more ammunition, which is unfortunate because I don't think he was really at fault hugely for the first 2 goals. But that was for me almost completely on Kev.
Yeah, me too. Again, I think I said this last week before I slagged them off as well. Like I could not be a bigger fan of Kevin Dabrowski. I could not be further away from the camp of people who think he should be dropped. I just don't think there's I've not seen anything from Andy McNeil that makes me think he's better than him. I think looking around the division, I don't think goalkeepers are a particularly strong suit for most teams in the division, and I think there's a large element of be careful what you wish for when it comes to swapping goalkeepers around. However,
just to add briefly on that, I mean, I think had Collins still been here, and had, for instance, Neil Collins said, look, there's a boy I know down from Barnsley, he's played 300 games in English League One, we can get him until the summer or something, then it would have felt different. But I think, just like you say, swapping Kev for Andy McNeil achieves virtually nothing.
Listen, I don't see what you gain, and it's you look around at the other goalkeepers in the division. There's not many who are kind of standouts for their team. Queen's Park and Morton, maybe the two, potentially Livingston, but like I guess it's be careful what you wish for, because I mean Thistle had the guy from Watford first half of the season, looked really good, but he was only on loan. He got recalled. They're back to David Mitchell again, and he's not as good. However, all of that is preamble to say, yeah, when you said 95%, I almost raised an eyebrow a little bit, and you said 95 to 100. It's like, yeah, I'm in that bracket with you. I think it's again, I read a Dunfermline supporter this morning saying that they thought he had no choice but to do that, because if he doesn't sort of dive in, that Kane's just going to take a touch and put it in the goal. Not for me. I think he's going wide enough that if Dabrowski keeps his feet, even though he's already kind of gone, if he doesn't dive in, I think he's at least got enough to sort of kind of shepherd Kane there. And it's almost a case of like, can you chip this back over me for somebody who's then going to have to compete with Paul Hanlon to try and header it in the goal? Like, you can see exactly why he's done it. You can see the thought process the whole way through, but he's never favourite to get to, and it's Kane does exactly the right thing. Allan, any dissent from you on that?
Yes, there is actually. I mean, don't get me wrong. Once the ball is going into the box, the blame is 100% on Kev. For me, the ball shouldn't be there in the first place. Scott Brown has played a better through ball to Chris Kane than Kane Richie Hosler ever could have.
Yeah,
it was just a really piss poor, half-assed challenge. He just kind of goes in and flicks the ball to I don't know if he's trying to pass it back to Kev. I don't know if he's thinking there's a defender there, or if he's just thinking get the ball away from him. I don't know, but it was really poor. Don't get me wrong, I'd still probably give maybe 80% of the blame to Kev, and Scott Brown gets 20 just for the really poor ball in the first place, which puts Kev in that position. And to be fair, we regularly sing his praises on here, so I think it's only fair to say probably symptomatic of a fairly below average performance with Scott Brown yesterday. Him and Matthews they were just overrunning that midfield. They couldn't get a grip of it. They're trying to do too much spoiling and playmaking, and neither of them's really a playmaker. Dylan Easton's in there to try and do that. I don't think that's where he's best suited either. But yeah, it was just... It was hard to stay in my seat at that point and not just walk out, I have to say.
It's something actually, for anyone who wasn't at Hamilton on Tuesday night, but who listened to the podcast that we did after it, we were joking at one point about passbacks and Kev picking them up. Actually, it was Scott Brown again. It was not dissimilar at all. In the middle of the park, and he was under a bit of pressure, and he just sort of hooked the ball towards his own goal. And it was more central than that one. So that one, as you say, is basically a through pass into the... I've not
seen a replay, but my impression of that one at the time on Tuesday actually was that he tried to boot it up the pitch and just sliced it back to Kev. So the referees deemed it not to be a deliberate pass back.
Actually, I thought he just
But
basically
maybe being
just like,
charitable.
under pressure just hooked it in a little bit like this one.
Mm.
Basically just gone, like, there's a 50-50 chance the opposition player's about to have this ball. There's a 100% chance he won't if I just kick it. And he's just kicked it.
Yeah.
And as I say, on Tuesday, it was straight at Dabrowski and it was kind of lofted to him and he just caught it. And at the time I was like, oh, why have you done that? Now, obviously, the referee didn't give it, so it's more likely what you've said that there was at least an element of a slice in it. But it's kind of careless, and I agree with your wider point there about the midfield. And again, I have an element of sympathy for because I think you're absolutely right. Matthews and Brown are trying to do it all. They're basically in a position now where the two of them have to be a three-man midfield. We miss Sam Stanton massively. But what I don't mean is we miss Sam Stanton since he went to Arbroath. I mean, we miss Sam Stanton from last year.
Season.
Like, since the summer, we have been missing that Sam Stanton, where we just don't really have... You know, in that, again, sorry for lapsing into Jonathan Wilson territory, but like in a three-man midfield, you basically want a 6, an 8, and a 10. You know, like a guy who'll predominantly sit and who can pass, a guy who's box-to-box, and a more creative guy at the tip. And like, but there's Venn diagrams. You all have to do a bit of everything.
Yeah.
And the one thing with Dylan Easton is, like, he's as creative as they come. You could not ask at this level for a guy who's more creative and scores the goals and wins the penalties and all that stuff. But he's not going to do the box-to-boxy bits and the coming back and the tackling that Sam Stanton would give you.
Yeah.
And it basically means that Brown and Matthews have to try and sort of do it all and then give it to Easton to do the end bit that he does so well. And as you say, they were just overrun yesterday. They just couldn't sort of find a groove. I'm wondering if...
It's worth saying as well.
Yeah.
Sorry, on you go.
No,
it's worth saying as well that that is the midfield. That's it. There's nothing else we can do. Because Robson clearly doesn't fancy Ewan Murray and Callum Fordyce, which means Doherty is playing in the right of the back three. It means that Stevenson is playing at the wing back, and the two guys you've potentially got who could sit deep in the midfield are needed in the defence. With Burns out injured, Stanton we have not replaced. Nobody's been added to replace Sam Stanton, and this we must have known for a good while that he was going to be something, that it was an untenable situation. He was going to be going, and we've not replaced him. So I've got a lot of sympathy for Ross Matthews and for Scott Brown, because at the moment they are the midfield. That's it.
Yeah.
There is nothing else.
So I was going to say, I wonder if when Sean Byrne comes back, which will hopefully be sooner rather than later, but obviously we'll have to wait and see, if we might end up seeing all three of them, which would almost be sort of unheard of previously. But I don't know whether you effectively push Scott Brown further forward and effectively ask him to be the Sam Stanton. And then you've got sort of Byrne as the furthest kind of sitting, the one who controls. You've got Matthews more box-to-boxy, and then you've got Brown slightly further forward. But certainly we're and we always knew we would. Like we said last season, like Sam Stanton is the only one we've got who does that, because there's very few in the division who can do that, certainly to that level. I think in terms of just pure profile, Kai Montague could go on to become that type of player, but obviously far too early to say what level of ability you'll be able to have. So that, again, that is one of the enduring issues that we have with the squad the way that it is at the moment. And again, you've got, I think transfer window shuts tomorrow. And it's not just, okay, again, we had this argument this morning about, like, is it worth effectively gambling on another striker? Like, if you have to go and spend money on another striker in the last day of the window to go and do it, like, is it worthwhile? Is it worthwhile just to get enough goals that you're not in any bother? Is it a case of, like, well, an extra place gets you £20,000 prize money, so if you can do the whole deal for less than £20,000 for 6 months, is that like the cost benefit analysis pays off or whatever. But more so than that, I don't think these players exist. But more than anything, like it's just there's not a string of guys who are really decent Scottish Championship number 10s kicking their heels, looking for somebody to pick them up, and like goal scorers probably even less so.
You're taking a chance on a youngster, which is always a gamble.
Exactly, and that's so.
And I think you can do that. Is the loan windows? Is it this time of year? Is it still a month longer as well that you can get loans from the Premiership, not necessarily from down south? I think. So maybe in the boardroom on Saturday we'll be like, so that Daniel Cummings in.
He's away at West Ham apparently, so that's not going to happen.
Yeah, it's really difficult for Barry Robson. I think that's worth acknowledging, given how much I've slagged off his interview and everything. Like he's not been dealt a good hand by any means at all. It's very unbalanced. I mean, the amount of goals in the treatment room is remarkable. It was nice to see, actually, well before kickoff, Callum Smith was walking about and certainly walking about freely. You know, he's gone beyond the point where he's on crutches or anything like that. So that's just, good to see. Hopefully that means he's coming on well. No expectation that we'll see him again this season, but nice to see that he's at least kind of up and about. Does feel like we're pinning a lot of hope on Lewis Vaughan. But again, I think it's worth saying that like any team would be.
Yeah.
There's not many teams in this division, if anywhere, where you can take out their 3 strikers and they're like, yeah, this is fine. We've got more who are like up to the task. Taking Lewis Vaughan out of the Rovers, it's like taking Brian Graham out of Thistle. Like, where would Thistle be if they'd had Rico Diak as their only striker for most of the season? And the fact that's before you talk about Callum Smith and Jack Hamilton coming out as well. Like going to Ayr and saying, right, you can't have Anton Dowds because he is injured. Oh, and also, so is George Oakley and so is Mark McKenzie.
It removes especially Jack Hamilton, it removes one of your plan B options.
Yeah.
Because we tried at times yesterday chucking long balls up, and it's safe to say Jamie Gullen and Aidan Marsh are not winning headers against Kyle Benedictus another day, whereas Jack Hamilton would win some headers, and then these guys potentially feed off it if they're up there. But it was a symptom of last season as well. The amount of times we played the ball as if Jack Hamilton was there when he was sat on the bench or in the treatment room. It's like, he's not there, stop doing it. It's not working.
Yeah. But one thing actually I will say for Jamie Gullen, in the couple of games we've had him back so far, he does get chances.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems like I'm damning him with faint praise, given that he misses quite a few of them. But that's not a foregone conclusion for this Rovers side, that you actually get chances. Yeah. Again, we did the numbers before that prior to the Hamilton game, where we averaged less than 2 shots on target a game. And it wasn't like we were firing 10 shots over the bar every game either. Gullen at least gets shots away. And if nothing else, if we learn nothing else from Kieran and Gwenya, it's that sometimes you get a shot away, it goes in the goal.
If he scored every chance he gets, he wouldn't be at Rovers. As simple as that. Absolutely.
And listen, I don't think it was a secret that I was pretty down on Jamie Gullen and what he brought to the team previously because of his preference for running in the corners. But I've actually been quite reassured since he's come back, just in the sense of there's been a lot of away games where we just haven't had shots, and at least he's getting shots away. And once he's up to speed, he'll be absolutely fine. There's various kind of questions raised about, and I don't think necessarily unfairly. In fact, it might even have been you who raised it, where it was like at the start of last season, we struggled to find the right back, and we decided we didn't want Jamie Gullen anymore, and we still don't have a right back, and Jamie Gullen's back again. But I'm sort of happier with the Jamie Gullen of it all than I was previously. So, I don't really, I'm not not as down on that as I think some other people are, and I think actually he'll be fine. And it's, to go back to the very start of the whole thing, one of the reasons why I'm not panicking about finishing bottom is I do think there's enough quality in this Rovers side to pick up enough points. I don't think I can't see us winning sort of like the 4 or 5 on the bounce. We would need to put ourselves back into contention for 4th again. But when you look at the teams around us, I don't see any of them doing it either. And I think we'll probably have enough, just more weeks than not, to pick up enough points that, we'll finish 7th.
Even if we did limp into the playoffs, can you see us putting the 6 back-to-back performances we'd need to... I mean, ultimately, I think there's only one team going up this season. The Premiership teams all look like they're capable of getting results. Even if St Johnstone somehow managed to get up to 11th, it would mean they'd be on a good run of form. So you expect the Premiership team to probably win the playoff again this year anyway. So.
Yeah, I mean, you said that it's like the league is kind of broken into like the top 4 and then the bottom 6. But really, in terms of like actual like level of performance, it's kind of the top 3, then the rest Thistle, although they've got a bit of a gap, and I think looking at it now, you'd say favourites to finish 4th. They're closer to the rest of us than they are the top 3, particularly since they lost that goalkeeper that we mentioned. And then I say Airdrie kind of at the bottom, but on a bit of a resurgence. So yeah, we'll see what happens from there.
Just in time for playing us in a few weeks.
Yeah, exactly. Allan, anything else you want to add from yesterday? Any final thoughts?
Ultimately, that a point I made in our group chat earlier. We're not as good as we all thought we were on Tuesday night, and we're not as bad as we all thought we were yesterday. We're, the truth's somewhere in the middle. I'm not getting downbeat after yesterday. We've got no right to be going to any ground in this league thinking we should win the game. We've got a right to go there, hoping we're going to win and thinking we've got a chance. But ultimately, the teams in this league are so level that you're going to lose some, you're going to win some. I'm not letting yesterday get me. The man of the performance wasn't great, but even with that, we still created more chances than we were 2 or 3 months ago. So I'm holding on to the positives, and we may or may not do some more business before tomorrow. Probably not. I expect lots of changes in the summer though.
Yeah, I think that seems guaranteed. Les, anything for you? Anything to conclude?
I think Allan makes a good point there, that it's never nice to lose games. Like Mickey Cameron said after Airdrie last season, nobody likes to lose a game of football. But the sort of general quality of the performance, I mean, that was way better than what we put in away to Queen's Park under Neil Collins. It's way better than what we put in
the last visit to East End.
I was just going to say the last visit to East End. The actual just there's a kind of sense of what we want to do, and a sense of sticking to it. Which, okay, you could argue at times verges on stubbornness, but there's at least sort of more of a sense that everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing. I am concerned about recruitment and the fact it's taken us so long to still not have a right back. And there is a kind of she'll be right mentality, I think, to shoehorning people into positions and expecting people to do stuff. It's a bit of a gamble to hope that that's going to get us through to the summer, but I think that seems to be the direction of travel. But it's absolutely something that we need to up our game for before next season, no matter what division we're in, is actually addressing the deficiencies in the squad in good time. But yeah, as I say, that on the whole, that performance was better than what we've seen, and hopefully we get more positive results as Robson gets more time with the players and gets to know everyone.
Yeah, it's so there's as much as I've been very downbeat, particularly in relation to Barry Robson's interview, more so, I mean, his interview I thought was worse than the performance, put it that way. But the performance alone I wasn't exactly enamoured with. But that is not to say even remotely that I'm like questioning the appointment or anything like that at all, because I'm really, really not. I think it's a case of right now, what we need is just like blunt pragmatism. Just do whatever it takes to get enough points to get through to the end of the season. Like, I think if we'd beaten Dunfermline yesterday, we could have gone, whoa, hang on a second. If we can win the next couple, we might be able to do something now. That for me, I think, is gone. It's just a case of basically battering through it. Because the squad that we've got is just, it's been through too many reshapings. You know, it's like a car that was bought new by like a family of 4, then went to be owned by like a Motability person for 6 months, and is now in the hands of like a 17-year-old with a Halfords voucher. So it's got like, you know, it's an automatic that you can you can change the gears without having to use the gear stick and all this kind of stuff. But it's also got like a spoiler and daft bits on the wheels that spin round. Like, it's just totally completely mismatched. Child locks are always on and stuff. In the summer, there just needs to be, as there would always be, that like single-minded, right, this is the plan, this is how we're going to play, here's the guys who've already got who fit it, the rest of them are away, bring in more guys who fit this plan.
Yeah.
And it's really just a case of, at the moment for Robson, it's what works best for the players who are here in order to maximise what we can do between now and the end of the season. Sean Byrne coming back in will help. Lewis Vaughan coming back in will help massively. But I think ultimately it's probably a case of getting to the summer now. Really. With the one caveat, of course, that we still have our cup run, which is gathering pace, I'm going to say. And we will be back to talk about that, talk about all of Celtic's weaknesses, where they can be got at, our various options for changing things up front, as we look ahead to next Saturday's trip to Celtic Park in the Scottish Cup. I suspect that will be Thursday night, but it'll be sometime around about then that we will be back. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for listening as always, and we will see you again later in the week. Goodbye.
Yeah.